It was hard for him to grow up in Anchorage. Jane didn't come from a Kilcher family background. After years of quiet, they told a secret that changed everything. The gear that Jane Kilcher wore all the time on Alaska, the last frontier, made her look strong. She seemed tough, but she had a secret she never thought she'd share. She's finally having a meltdown about what she found after keeping it a secret for so long. The point of no return. The dawn of July 23, 2023, on the Kilcher farm was like any other summer day. The sun was high in Alaska, giving the area a rare stretch of warmth that almost makes the harsh winters worth it. Jane Kilcher knew what she had to do when she woke up, even though she didn't want to do it. 4 years, she had been holding a secret that was slowly destroying the Alaskan life she had built. She was shocked at how steady her hands were as she reached for her phone. The words had been going through her head for weeks, coming together during long hours spent by herself in the woods or on the water. Everything seemed real when I saw them on the screen. "Let's go," she wrote. "Lee is divorcing me, and it's so sad, but I can't do anything about it. It hurts that I lost my best friend, but I guess that's just life. I will not be stopped." As soon as the post went live, people sent their thoughts. Surprise, disbelief, support, and anger. Most people didn't know that the news was only the beginning. The split didn't happen overnight. It was because of something Jane had found years before. Something she tried to hide, deal with, and stay alive, but it was wearing her down in the background. Jane and Lee had seemed like one of the best couples on reality TV for 17 years. They made it through Otis Lee's terrible climbing accident in 2015 when, in Otter Cove, he broke 26 bones, pricked both lungs, and almost died when he fell. While the cameras were rolling, Jane took care of the farm, her family, and the healing. She had shown how strong she was many times before, but this task wasn't physical. It made me feel. When you live on a television show, you learn how to show a different side of yourself that fits a story. Jane was great in that part. The tough and skilled fisherwoman who caught huge halibut, shot straight, built cabins, and did well in Alaska's harsh conditions. That story was true, but it was missing some parts. Behind closed doors, she was facing a problem that her wilderness skills could not solve. Some small mistakes were made at the start. Conversations cut short, changes that couldn't be explained, and patterns that didn't make sense. As a commercial fisherman for many years, Jane learned how to read currents and spot danger early. It was her gut telling her that something was wrong with her marriage. The Kilcher homestead is beautiful and lonely. It is spread out over more than 600 acres near Homer, Alaska. Since the 1940s, it has been based on self-sufficiency. However, problems can hide behind all the hard work. Jane didn't find out everything at once. Instead, she learned little bits and pieces that changed the way she saw everything. She did her best to make it work. She always did. But endurance alone can't change some facts. Jane had already been sad by the time she hit post that July morning. She lost her best friend and a part of herself that she had worked on for almost 20 years when she lost her husband. Living before the truth. To understand the weight of what Jane found, you first have to understand who she was before everything began to fracture. Jane Kilcher was not born into the homestead life or raised inside the Kilcher heritage. She was born Christina Jane Furman on September 14, 1974 in Homer, Alaska. Her father, coming from Texas, passed down a deep love for fishing and the outdoors. But Jane's path was shaped by freedom long before it intersected with the Kilcher name. Ironically, she had known almost her entire life. Growing up in Homer, their lives overlapped early. Asley, who was friends with Jane's brother, teased her constantly the way young boys often do. Years later, Jane would laugh about how he and his friends would raid her room, leaving chaos behind. At that age, she was only 11, and the idea that this annoying boy would one day marry her would have seemed silly. Alaska, on the other hand, brings people back into each other's lives when they least expect it. Jane built a life that stood on its own before she met Lee. She worked as a commercial fisherwoman, making a name for herself in a field controlled by men where toughness was expected. It wasn't fishing for fun. This was work to stay alive. Long seasons, bad weather, broken tools, and hard physical work all the time. When the fish were biting, she worked 20-hour days, pulling heavy lines and nets through storms that tried her skill and nerve. She learned to be disciplined, independent, and quiet sure that she could handle almost anything during those years on the water. Jane was married to Dikran Kasuni at that time in her life. They had a girl together, Piper Isolde Kasuni, on June 4, 2003. Jane became a single mom after her marriage ended, but she didn't give up the hard life she had chosen. She kept fishing and taking care of others, and kept showing herself every single day. Lee's road looked different, but it was also restless. He is the third child of A.Z. Kilcher and Lenidra Carroll. Music and custom were a big part of his childhood. His older brother Shane took a more low-key road, while his sister Jewel became a star who was nominated for a Grammy. Lee, who was often seen as the bad guy, left Alaska when he was young and went with his guitar to find meaning in his life. He felt pulled home in the end, like many people who grew up on the land do. When he went back to the homestead, he had to deal with his family's history, expectations, and the question of where he really fit. Lee had been married before too. He got married to Nantia Cryentu in 1997 and she moved to Homer to work. On May 12, 2001, their son Jane Kilcher was born. That marriage also ended, leaving Lee to figure out how to be a father, take care of his family, and find his place in the Kilcher system. Music brought Jane and Lee back together after all these years when they were adults. Around a fire, people sang songs. When she sang and played the harmonica or guitar, they formed a bond that felt both natural and comfortable. They saw that the other person loved Alaska and wanted a life based on hard work and purpose instead of ease and comfort. They knew what it meant to work hard, follow traditions, and choose a hard life because it felt right. In November, they got married. 7th, 2006, near Homer at the head of the bay. The service was small and personal, which was in line with their beliefs. Piper and Etienne became a part of farm life when their families mixed. Soon after, cameras from Alaska, the last frontier, came into their world and recorded how they fished, hunted, built houses, and got ready for harsh winters. Jane brought important skills to the farm. The water in southern Alaska is full of king salmon, silver salmon, trout, cod, and red salmon. Jane knew these seas very well. She knew how to read the weather, predict changes, and catch enough fish every summer too. Enough food to get everyone through the winter. She became an important part of the Kilt's way of life and earned her place by doing things, not by having a title. Their relationship looked strong and real on TV. They fixed up cabins, dealt with problems, and helped each other get through tough times. In 2016, they said their vows again in front of a camera to celebrate 10 years of marriage. Fans saw pictures of them ice fishing with loving notes, which added to the idea that their marriage did well even when things got tough. Reality TV, on the other hand, only shows bits and pieces. A lot of Jane's life was never shown on TV. She lost projects that were very important to her, like her garden, because they were too dull. As someone who married into the Kilcher family and had to balance being independent with meeting their standards, she rarely showed how hard it was for her. As Piper and Etienne got bigger, Jane kept them off camera on purpose, choosing privacy over being seen. On the homestead, people lived together with their extended families and shared space. Each family had their own set of roles and customs. Jane had to find her way around that system while still being herself. She kept things in check in private long before anything fell apart in public. What they found. Jane didn't really set out to find anything. She wasn't trying to find trouble or think someone was betraying her. She was just being present, living her life, and doing the work. But sometimes you can't avoid finding out the truth. It began after Lee's accident a few years ago. Beyond the injuries, that fall in 2015 was a disaster that changed people's lives in many ways. When Lee fell while climbing alone in Otter Cove, he broke his arm, shoulder, ankle, and hip. He also hurt his ribs and lungs. It was scary to be rescued, and it was even scarier to get better. He was stuck, dependent, and angry for months. Jane was in charge of everything. She ran the farm, took care of the kids, and helped her husband through the worst time in his life. Something changed between them during those months. Jane saw it, but at first she couldn't say what it was. Lee grew detached in ways other than being in pain. He began to talk about putting up a cabin farther into the woods, away from the main farm and from everyone. It was his goal to live a more honest life and to push the limits of what it meant to live off the grid. Jane knew what was going on. Like you, she loved the wild. But there was something strange about the way he